Because going forward you'll be responsible for maintaining the FDM maps, this chapter will serve as an overview as to how those maps work. I've logged out as my trainer user and am now logged in as myself. This is because I'm an admin and I want to show you some of the maps you may not have access to. The way we access the maps is by going to Activities, Maps. There are 4 types of maps. We've got explicit, between, in, and like. This is the order in which they're processed, so FDM is able to process the exceptions prior to the defaults. At Camouflage Solidale, we'll only be using explicit and like maps. Looking at the other dimensions, we can see that we're mapping entity, ICP, and our custom dimensions. Some locations may also need to maintain an entity and ICP mapping, but for the most of you, you'll only be responsible for maintaining the account and custom to mapping. Custom to is your function, and it only is valid for the operating expenses section of the income statement. The entity is always going to be based on the location. So some locations are only valid for one entity, whereas others, like SAP 300, have multiple entities within one location. First, I'm going to show you an example of an ICP-like map. As I said before, likes you can use wildcards. A question mark is a single character, whereas an asterisk or the star can be multiple characters. Here, we've got a rule that defaults all ICP to ICP none. We list our asterisk and we list our target ICP. Now if we go back to the account dimension, this particular location, Bearcat, does not have any like mapping for accounts. So if we go to our explicit mapping, you'll see that this is where the accounts have been mapped. As you'll notice, we've got our column that I mentioned in the last chapter, that some are ticked and some are unticked, and this is to flip the sign from what your general ledger has to what HFM will house. And an additional thing is that you can ignore certain accounts. So for example, 2990-01-01, this account is being ignored. This could be because it's a subtotal account or it's an account that's already been reported elsewhere. I should mention that you should never find an account ending in 6 as your target FM account. And this is because these accounts are only used by corporate for intercompany eliminations. Moving on to the custom to mapping, which is your function mapping. As we've seen before, we're using the account mapped to a function. The only time you'll have to maintain this mapping table is if you add an account in the account mapping that happens to be an OPEX account. What you'll need to do is create a duplicate line for that account in the custom to explicit mapping, and you'll have to map it to one of the functions within HFM. For example, Bearcat account 5700-01-01 is mapped to function 2000, which is general and administrative. Now, anything that doesn't fall within the accounts in the source field will default because at all locations we've got a custom to like map that defaults to the none member or no function. We've entered it here. It is one of the last rules to be applied. If we go to an entity explicit map, we can see here that Bearcat maps their entities. The source entity is based on account, and the target entity is the corresponding HFM entity. The only locations that will be using this mapping is Bearcat, Solidale USA, and Solidale Canada.